Imagine London. You probably picture a noisy city full of carriages, factory smoke, and people rushing around, right? Now, erase all of that. The year is 1665, and the first thing you notice as you enter the city is the silence. This is not a peaceful silence. It is a silence of fear. The narrow dirt and stone streets are empty. Grass has begun to grow between the cobblestones, where thousands of people once passed every day. The only sound you hear is the wind hitting wooden shutters, and occasionally a muffled scream of pain coming from inside a sealed house. Look at the doors of the houses. On many of them you see a terrible mark, crudely painted in red paint. A cross, and just below it, scrawled in chalk or charcoal, the phrase that chills anyone to the bone, "Lord, have mercy upon us." This is not a prayer. It is a warning. It means the Black Plague has entered that house. And once it enters, the door is locked from the outside. No one leaves. You walk down the middle of the street, avoiding the walls, avoiding taking a deep breath. The smell in the air is a strange mix. It smells of open sewers, but also of strong perfume, vinegar, and the smoke of burning wood. People believe that bad smells spread the disease, so they burn everything they can to clean the air. Do you see a lone figure coming toward you? She does not look at you. She crosses the street to keep her distance. She holds a cloth filled with herbs against her nose and walks fast, her eyes wide with terror. Welcome to London in the year of the Great Plague. Here, your neighbor is not your friend. He is a deadly threat. If you think the disease is the worst part, think again. The real torture begins with the law of the city. The order of the Lord Mayor is brutal and absolute. If a single person in your house shows symptoms, the entire house is sealed immediately. It doesn't matter if you, your wife, or your young children are perfectly healthy. You are condemned to remain locked in with the sick person, breathing the same foul air, drinking the same water, waiting your turn to die. The quarantine lasts 40 days after the death of the last occupant, if anyone is left alive. Look at your front door. There is an armed guard standing there day and night. His job is not to protect you from thieves. His job is to make sure you don't escape. You try to negotiate through the window, offer your last gold coins, beg for your children's lives, but the guard has strict orders. If you try to step onto the street, you will be forced back inside with the tip of a spear. Inside, in the darkness of the sealed house, the atmosphere becomes a psychological nightmare. Food supplies begin to run out. Water is rationed. The summer heat turns the house into a greenhouse. You hear your family members coughing in the next room, and every cough sounds like a death sentence. You watch your own body every day in front of the mirror, desperately searching for black spots on your skin or the painful swellings in your armpits and groin, the dreaded buboes the size of eggs. Many, in desperation, try to escape through the back, jumping from rooftop to rooftop under cover of night, risking a broken neck. Some manage to flee to the countryside, carrying the disease with them to nearby villages. Others are caught, and the punishment is severe. In some extreme cases, the authorities even nail solid wooden boards over windows and doors, turning your own house into your collective coffin. For those locked inside, the house stops being a home. It becomes a dark waiting room for hell. In the middle of this despair, when you look through the crack in the window, a figure appears that seems to have stepped out of an ancient nightmare. He walks slowly through the empty streets, wearing a long, heavy coat of waxed leather, thick gloves, and a wide-brimmed hat. But it is the face that makes the blood freeze in your veins. He wears a rigid white mask, with red glass lenses and a long, curved beak, like a giant macabre bird searching for carrion. This is the plague doctor. The mask is not a prop meant to frighten. At the time, science believed the disease was spread by miasma, the foul smell hanging in the air. Inside that 15-centimeter-long beak, There are tightly packed aromatic herbs, spices, camphor, myrrh, rose petals, and sponges soaked in vinegar. The doctor firmly believes that by filtering the air through these essences, he will be protected from the invisible death floating in London's yellow fog. He approaches, but keeps his distance. He never touches you with bare hands. He carries a white wooden staff. He uses it to lift your clothes, examine the swellings from afar, and even to push back the sick who try to approach, begging for help. And the treatments he offers? They are as horrifying as the disease itself. Without any understanding of viruses or bacteria, the medicine of the time is a spectacle of horror. They cut open the swellings while the patient is still alive with dirty knives to drain the pus, then cauterize them with hot iron. They apply leeches to balance the blood. Some doctors recommend placing dried toads or pigeons cut in half on the chest to draw out the magical poison from the body. Others prescribe drinking mercury or arsenic powder. Most of the time, the treatment only hastens death in agony. When you see the bird's beak at your door, you know that hope is already gone. He is not there to cure. He is there only to record one more number in the cold count of the dead. When the sun goes down, London changes its atmosphere. The tense silence of the day is broken by a repetitive, mechanical and terrifying sound that echoes off the stones, the creak of heavy wooden wheels and the metallic ringing of a handbell. A man, usually drunk to endure the job, walks in front of the cart shouting the phrase that will haunt your dreams forever. "Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!" At the height of the plague, all human rituals of dignity disappeared. There are no candlelit wakes, no polished wooden coffins, no priests saying prayers. The number of victims rose so high that churches were forbidden to ring their bells for each death, because they would ring without stopping day and night, driving those still alive mad. Doors open in the darkness. Families, exhausted and crying, dragged the bodies of their parents, children and spouses out onto the wet street. They are wrapped only in stained sheets or old rags. The carriers, with cloths tied over their faces, throw the bodies into the back of the open cart. They are stacked on top of each other like firewood. Rich and poor, nobles and beggars, all mixed together in the same pile of tragedy, without distinction. The cart moves on, heavy, toward the edges of the parish, where the plague pits were dug, the great mass graves. There is no more space in the consecrated cemeteries. Huge, deep holes opened in the cold earth wait for the night's load. You watch from your window, hidden in the darkness, as the bodies are dumped into the pit like garbage. No names, no headstones, no memory. Only a layer of white quicklime is thrown over them to try to burn away the infection and contain the unbearable stench, and then earth is piled on top. There, in those anonymous pits that today lie beneath London's parks and buildings, entire generations of families rest, erased from history in a matter of weeks. The desperation for a cure or prevention drives the city into collective madness and superstition. The authorities, desperate and trying to find a visible culprit, decide that domestic animals are the carriers of the plague. An official order is issued by the mayor: exterminate all dogs and cats in the City of London. In a brutal massacre, it is estimated that 40,000 dogs and 200,000 cats were killed in the streets within a few days. What they did not know is that, with this act, they had just condemned the city to total destruction. Cats were the main predators of rats. With the cats gone, the population of black rats, which carried the fleas infected with the plague bacterium, exploded out of control, invading homes and spreading the disease even faster. Other bizarre measures were taken in the panic. It was believed that the strong smoke of tobacco protected the lungs against poisoned air. Smoking became practically mandatory. Imagine the scene: elementary school children being forced by teachers to smoke pipes in the classroom under the threat of being whipped if they refused. Tobacco was worth more than gold in those days. And to clean the city's air, the Lord Mayor ordered giant bonfires to be lit in the main streets. Imagine London at night, hundreds of bonfires burning on every corner, day and night, consuming coal, wood, and pitch. The city looked like a true hell on earth, lit by red fire, covered in thick, suffocating smoke, with the smell of burning wood trying to mask the sweet, nauseating stench of death coming from the houses. People walked among the flames like wandering souls, coughing in the smoke, praying that the fire would burn the poison out of the air. But the plague kept advancing, indifferent to fire, smoke, and prayers. After months of absolute terror, something finally came to save the city. It was not a doctor, it was not a prayer, and it was not the government. It was the weather. The winter of 1665 arrived with brutal force. Temperatures plunged below freezing, turning the River Thames into a thick sheet of ice. And with the intense cold, biology did its work. Fleas and rats died from the cold or entered deep hibernation. The number of deaths began to fall dramatically, week after week. Little by little, timidly, the locked doors began to open. The survivors, pale, thin, and traumatized, stepped into the streets, blinking in the sunlight. King Charles II and the court, who had cowardly fled to the countryside at the start of the crisis, returned to London in their carriages. The city had lost nearly 100,000 people. A quarter of its entire population was wiped from the map. But fate still held one last cruel blow for London, or perhaps a necessary final purification. Just 1 year later, in September 1666, in a small bakery on Pudding Lane, a spark fell onto a pile of flour and started the Great Fire of London. The fire consumed the medieval city of old dry wood as if it were paper. The filthy, rat-infested houses, the narrow alleys where the plague thrived, the contaminated streets, all were turned into ashes and smoking ruins. Though devastating, the fire destroyed the last lingering pockets of the disease and allowed London to be rebuilt from the ground up, cleaner, more modern, with brick buildings and wider streets. The Black Plague never returned with that overwhelming force. Today, as you walk through modern London, through green parks and busy streets, remember, you are walking over the forgotten bones of that terrible year. This was the restored history of the Great Plague. If you had the stomach to make it this far and want to keep traveling through the reality of history, subscribe to the channel. History is dirty, but we are here to clean it. Until next time.